Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. Has there been a declaration of public notice?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll go ahead to public appearances. Beth Esser.
Hello. Hi. My name is Beth Esser and I live at 6009 Ridgewood Avenue in Monona. My family is one of the lucky ones that our children got into Nuestro Mundo, so we have both our feet in the Monona Grove School District and the Madison School District. I also work part-time in the Madison School District. So tonight I'm here to echo the comments from other speakers who have been here to speak about the school district pursuing renewable energy. I want to just thank the board and the district staff that are already getting started on talking about that for the new construction. And I hope that this can extend to all existing buildings as well in the school district. Just last week, the Madison School Board announced their commitment to 100% renewable energy by 2040 for all district energy needs. Madison became the largest school district in the nation to make this commitment, and I hope that Monona can join in this effort of school districts all across the country to making this commitment. It's imperative that all of us, individuals, cities, schools, businesses, etc., make the transition off of fossil fuels. I think another speaker from a previous night already mentioned the necessity of this by citing the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report from last fall. This report indicated that globally we need drastic and unprecedented cuts to carbon emissions by 2030 and need to be at carbon neutrality by mid-century to avoid the worst effects of climate change and to try to keep our warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is the threshold that scientists indicate is necessary. If we can reach carbon neutrality sooner than that, it gives us even greater chance of avoiding those worst effects of climate change. Therefore, our new construction and our existing buildings need to be energy efficient and powered by renewable energy. As a school district, you are helping to raise the next generation. In 2030, our current first graders, including my daughter Isla, will be graduating. And that, as you recall, is the year that we need to cut drastically by. We absolutely must do all that we can to preserve the world they are inheriting. To do anything less is failing in our responsibilities as parents, school districts, and community. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Okay, we'll move to the consent agenda.
Move the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Has been moved to second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Discussion? Motion carries. Recognitions.
Okay. The Monona Grove boys track team athletes recently volunteered at the Special Olympics track meet in Oregon. Thank you for volunteering your time, helping others. Very proud of the efforts of our students. Cottage Grove School, Taylor Prairie, GDS, and Winnequa all recently held an art night. Student artwork was on display, music played by students filled the halls, and makerspaces offered hands-on learning opportunities for the families and community members who participated. Last week, a group of Monona Grove High School students came together with their peers for the first ever Dane County Youth Social Justice Forum. The forum was created to bring youth leaders together to make connections and have conversations on the work of social justice, and we're very proud of their work. And that was an offshoot of some of the work done with our Dane County Equity Consortium, planning that event. And then finally, each spring, the Forever Friends group at Cottage Grove School holds a student talent show. This year, the Forever Friends group also created a scholarship for a Monona Grove High School senior. Thank you to the Forever Friends group for all their hard work, and to the high school BSU who volunteered to help with concessions, ticket taking, judging, scorekeeping, photo booth, and stage equipment at the talent show.
All right.
I just want to mention, and I'll bring the names next week because I don't have them right now, but Meridian Point Hospital gave their student scholarships recently, and one past Monona Grove student and one is a current Monona Grove student of 5 won scholarship, so I'll get those numbers.
Wonderful.
All right, correspondence and announcements.
Just for announcements, reminding the board that we have 2 graduation ceremonies coming up at the end of the year that board members are invited to attend. First of all, MG21 holds their graduation on Thursday, May 30th at 7 o'clock at the Monona Community Center. And then Monona Grove High School on Sunday, June 2nd at 1 o'clock at Monona Grove High School. If you haven't already, you'll be getting email invitations as well for both of those events. I think you have for the high school.
High school.
For both? Okay.
What's the date of the MG21?
On Thursday, May 30th.
At 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Community Center. Yeah.
All right, move right along. Superintendents report. Yeah.
Okay, I have 2 items. First of all is regarding the open enrollment update. Jared Rosing usually gives this report annually at this time, but it's pretty straightforward. On your board docs, you'll see just as far as the actual numbers that came in on open enrollment applications. It closed at the end of April. We had 225 applications in. The spreadsheet breaks it down by grade level, so you can see how many seats that we have available at each grade level, as well as how many applications. And so it matches up fairly well. Certainly there are some of the grade levels where we won't fill all the seats, which is just fine. That leaves us more space and flexibility for future years. And so the process is, at this point, Jared and his staff are going through the process of reviewing all the applications. All the resident school districts are submitting information regarding special education status and IEPs, and then sorting through our procedures. If there are more applicants than space per grade level, we have a lottery system, and then during this month, or by the end of the month, all the families who are offered a seat receive that written notification, and then they have a time frame in which to notify us whether they accept that seat or not. And so when we get to the end of June, we'll report back with how many seats were accepted, and that's also an opportunity for us, for the board, to consider any final adjustments for potential additional seats if our enrollment projections end up a little bit lower than they were in January when you had to make this initial decision. And so if there aren't any available, we could offer, if they're waiting lists, potentially you could offer a few more seats if we have space in any of those grade levels. So we'll keep you updated as that process evolves here in these next couple months.
Dan, I got a quick question. How does the open enrollment work with special education and regular ed? Is there a cap on special education numbers, or is it one group of numbers for both?
Yeah. So it's a little bit, the law changed just a couple of years ago about separating those out for determining seats. So Krista and her staff use a formula to determine, what our caseloads are of our current staff to determine whether there's space or not. So I think at the time after we go through this, we'll reevaluate those seats as well. But I think we list it by grade level. I think we also probably look at by program as well. Obviously, that makes a difference. So.
Okay.
Okay, and then the second piece, just really brief update with regarding to Healthcare Benefits Committee. We just met this afternoon. I just added this afternoon the minutes from last month's meeting, as well as today's agenda, just to give you a little bit of a feel for the things that we're talking about. At the next board meeting on June 12th, we'll actually have it as an agenda item for the board to consider. We will talk about the advisory committee's recommendations as well as the administrative recommendations. I have to report that they're the same. Jared and our committee has done just fabulous work. And basically, we had looked at the as a budget issue and the increases that we've had with healthcare costs these last couple of years, the committee was charged that if we do need to try to control costs, which we do, what would be the best way in order to look at potential plan changes and otherwise. And they came up with an excellent recommendation that's reasonable, that will also help balance our budget. So all that information will be presented next month, and we also have some of our staff members that were on that advisory committee join us that evening as well, so we can speak to the process that they went through with regard to the recommendation. So extremely pleased with where we landed at the end of tonight's meeting.
Any questions, comments? All right, thank you, Dan. Board reports. Eric.
We met last night, Teaching, Learning, and Equity Committee. Again, I thought it was a really good meeting. Shelby Steele, Dan, Lisa Hepburn, Krista Foster, all presented to the committee members, and we talked about the Monona Grove curriculum review and renewal and the 6-year review calendar. I think that we had a really healthy discussion about how curriculum can affect teaching, learning, and equity in the school district. And I'm looking forward to continuing to develop our draft report of recommendations to the board. We're going to be meeting with Susan and Dan about that. And our next meeting is June 4th at 6:30 p.m. I also just want to say I'm really happy with the way that this committee is moving, and I anticipate some really positive results for the school district because of it. So, and I appreciate everybody that's involved with it.
I agree.
I appreciate you both. And the people that's on the committee, they're doing a good job. I really believe that there's going to be a lot of positive energy moving forward into the school district. I really see some really good stuff that's going to be happening here. All right, we'll go ahead to possible action items. Let's start with charter school contract between the Monona Grove School District and Monona Grove Liberal Arts Charter School for the 21st century.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
just real brief summary. It's pretty self-explanatory in the summary. I think the board just approved it at the last meeting. We found a mistake. We had several revisions back and forth, and somehow one sentence got inadvertently deleted that needed to be in there. And so we're asking you to approve the revised charter with that additional sentence which occurs on page 11.
Okay, so I'll move to approve. Someone can move to approve of the MG21 charter as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so Peter move, Susan Fox second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Second item is Spanish club trip to Dominican Republic.
Okay, so we have a number of trips that are different clubs and groups, travel and per board policy, anytime we have an international travel, it requires board approval. So you see a summary of the trip submitted by our high school Spanish teachers, Kylie Ramirez and Aaron Flesh. And Dr. Broust is here to answer any questions that you may have regarding the trip. But we're recommending approval for a trip to Dominican Republic in the summer of 2020.
This is funded. Students pay the fee for the trip.
Yes, yeah, it's student cost. They, as you know, these trips have gotten more and more expensive with travel, so they try to look into that and pick places that aren't quite as expensive to travel to, but they're all expensive. They do try to have them early enough that, as you know, this isn't next summer, the following summer, where they try to arrange. Both kids can plan to work, save money, and they also try to work with them, try to, if they need to do some fundraising for students. But yes, we don't, for students who have financial difficulty, we obviously don't provide any support for that, so the families and students are on their own.
And then the staff that's going to have to pay for their own.
I think if a certain number of kids go and raise, I think with the companies that go, then it's part of then they're funded by the company.
And I was just going to add, this is a company that we've worked with for a lot of years. They've done the Spanish Club trip for several years, I think, to Costa Rica and different companies. And so they're a well-established group that they're going with.
Yeah, and Aaron and Kylie both have done a number of trips. They do a good job. They're well organized, and they do a nice job with it.
I'd move approval of the Spanish Club trip to the Dominican Republic in June 2020 as presented.
Second.
Peter first and
I'll second.
second, Eric second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, 2019-2020 board committees. We're down 2 people, which we Jeff would have been here too. I did, however, have names who I want to lead to chair a couple of the committees. But then we need to discuss a couple of them as well, and Jeff is not here. So I just wanted to, yes, go ahead.
Well, I guess I think I'm a little concerned about always putting things off when we have a quorum of quorum is 4, we have 5, so I just think we could go ahead and talk about it. To me, the 3 committees that we absolutely need to have would be the Employee Relations Committee, even though that one has only met once in my recollection in the last couple of years. It came about after Act 10 when the grievance procedure was changed, and there can be areas of conflict when it doesn't fill a grievance, and so the idea was if it can't be resolved between staff and a building principal or administration, it could come to this Employee Relations Committee. Actually, it would always have gone to the superintendent by then. And we've only had one where that happened, and that ended up being resolved pretty easily. So but it's just a committee by policy, and I think it's in the handbook too. I'm not sure if it is, but I know we talked about it, and the MGA had requested that we have this committee, so it's one that we do need. It only has 2 board members on it. And then personnel and policy, I think for sure we need, just for, I think, for fairly obvious reasons. The Community Engagement Communications Government Relations Committee is the one I guess I would question at this point, in the sense that when we established that committee, what we were seeing was every year when the board would get together and talk about how the year went, communications was always an area where we felt like we just weren't getting the job done, and it was hard with staff. And now we have a communication director, which we did not have when we established this committee. And I think if you look at I don't know what the policy is. The policy here. If you look at what the committee is supposed to do, it's supposed to, 1, advise the board upon and promote communications between the district and the community stakeholders. 2, engage with parents and community groups. 3, engage with the Monona Grove Education Foundation, PTO, booster groups, and other district-related organizations. 4, advise the board upon and promote relations with local and state government. And 5, perform other duties directed by the board. Those are the main duties. And then we also have the one that if the board directed the committee, it could advise and develop fundraising strategies. And then the last one was advise the board on use and development of facilities as related to community use and community support activities. I'm not sure I've ever understood that last part. We had an ad hoc committee when we needed facilities. So the rest of it, I feel like, are mostly the job of our communications director, and she's doing all those things at this point. When we get to it, the Teaching, Learning, and Equity Committee is an ad hoc committee, and that'll continue as ad hoc because because the report is still coming. So, and then that's a committee I would like to see continue. That's just my personal thought. So, I mean, I'd like, and maybe at that point we could have discussion about whether we wanted to make that a standing committee or not. But anyway, that's kind of where I am on this. But
yeah, for me, I agree with the Teaching, Learning, Equity, with all other districts that actually have paid positions for that. I think that we have in the committee, I would like to see that continue as well. You're doing some good things there, and hopefully we can make that a standing committee. The community engagement, when I was on it as a parent on the committee, was helping to get this strengthened up to have a hire, which we did hire And everything that you did say is what was put in the job description, because I was on that committee. And she has been doing a phenomenal job. And I think that we would not need that committee anymore. So I would like to see maybe remove that committee, and then in the future make the TLE a standing committee.
Well, I would like to continue the TLE committee for at least another year, because we have some, we're making some good progress, but we need some more time to continue what we're doing. So I would like to see that continue. Regarding the community engagement committee, I'm a little hesitant on making a decision on that, because isn't Jeff the chairperson of that committee?
Well, for last year he was. He might not be this year.
Right.
In other words,
but
we're reforming the
he's not
committee.
here, so
He did voice an opinion that he felt it was important to, I mean, he sent us all an email that, which I guess is, to make it not an open meeting violation, I'll say right now, his position was he felt it was doing important work and it should continue. So that is, but yeah, he's not here to say that for himself. So
If we wanted to,
so what do you want?
no, sorry.
No,
If we didn't want to not have that committee, we do need to bring the policy and change it.
And the policy is here, actually. When I looked at it, I missed it. The policy is actually right here.
so
If the board decides to eliminate a particular standing committee, they can do that, and then we change. That process also works the other way. Then we just revise the policy to address the board decision. So we can do that. We added this and changed the policy to add it. We didn't change the policy and then add it. So that structure isn't required to do this. I think we should give Katie a shot at this and just see if we're still uncomfortable with the community engagement. But I agree, maybe we should just wait for a final board decision on that until Jeff is here. I think we're fine with the equity committee. I think we all support continuing it. What it says, basically, I would just say let's continue it as an ad hoc committee, because it can serve until it's discharged its duties. So I don't think we need to mess with the status of that unless you guys come back and say, we want to make this a standing committee, and that's one of your recommendations. Then as a board, we can act on that, on your recommendation. I know at least many of us are incredibly supportive of that committee and really enjoyed the meeting last night. It was one of the best discussions I've ever heard. It was really good. Again, I think personnel, we have to continue. We have to keep that interaction open. And the policy committee is critical because we're getting updates every day and we just need to do that work. So I'm pretty comfortable. So we need chairs of personnel and policy. And then I don't think, we can always do employee relation. Maybe we want a recommendation from personnel on the employee relations. I don't think we need that.
Well, it is a regular, standing
What?
committee. Sorry, go ahead, finish.
And then, again, community engagement. Sometimes you just sit back and say, okay, let's see what happens and see if we need it. You know, and you just observe and collect data for a year.
Well, I was just going to say, the four are standing committees, so if I wouldn't, I guess even though the Employee Relations Committee didn't even meet last year, I think we should assign a couple people to it. What we did typically was just, the Personnel Committee doesn't have anything to do with it, but we did tend to pick 2 people from that committee to be on it. And then whether it meets or not is fine, but at least it's there in case the need arises. I'd be comfortable waiting to, assuming we're going to do the committees, I'm waiting to just appoint anyone to community engagement until we have time. If people don't feel like they want to make a decision on that tonight, that's another thing we could do. The ad hoc committee, I had been, when it says ad hoc committees serve until the committee is discharged upon completion of their task, this one was an unusual one in that it didn't have us real specific task. It is going to come in with recommendations, but I think Susan's point is well taken that it could continue as ad hoc even at that point. And Andrew, because you were a member of that committee and you're now board president, you're ex officio, so it opens up a spot for another board member to be on it possibly too, if that's something that, so that's another possibility. So anyway, that's just a couple other thoughts.
I was going to ask the procedure for determining who's on what committees. How do we, I forgot, since we did, it was a year ago that we did that. What is our procedure for doing that?
Well, initially the board president appoints chairs, and then according to policy is supposed to consult with those chairs on terms of making appointments, and then the president makes appointments.
It's right here in the policy.
Yeah, it's in the policy. If you
So,
hear it.
so as for example, the Teaching Learning Equity Committee, since Andrew is now the president, that will open up a spot on that.
Right.
So that I'll work with Andrew on determining who's going to fill that spot.
That's right.
Can we
Yeah, and
determine
the board president.
Can we determine who's interested in that spot?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would suggest that you ask the board members.
Well, Andrew could
Ask the
actually
board.
send an
Can I
email
ask
out.
the board now who's interested?
Well,
You
yeah,
absolutely can, because we're discussing board commitment.
Right.
I'm interested
Who would
in that.
be? Would you be interested?
Yeah, I'd be
Okay.
interested in that.
Susan, would you be interested?
Sure, of course. And I already told Andrew that. I sent, normally, the board president sends out the committees and says, which things are you interested in serving on? And, you know, again,
I didn't receive any email asking.
I did
requesting.
not receive an email. I responded because I know that's generally the process that and you've been on for over 10 years, Peter, so
That's
I would
true.
have expected you to follow a similar process.
Except that it has never been our process in the past. So I can't follow process. It's never been our process in the past. However,
Could I suggest we have raised hands, please, instead of going
Sure.
back and forth? So what the policy says is the committee assignments may be made by the board president in consultation with the committee chair during the year if necessary. I'm sorry, that's a revision thing. The way they're appointed is simply that the president is authorized to appoint as soon as possible after the reorg members of the board as committee chairs, and in consultation with the committee chairs, the board president appoints members of standing committees, where they shall serve a term of 1 year. So the committees are, as constituted last year, are done. We're starting new committees. The exception to that is the ad hoc committee, and the only comment I would make about that as far as adding new members is because I was in my head thinking that it might be finished for this year at the end of when that recommendation was done, but then kind of re-upped, and we don't necessarily have to do it that way, but because I've been involved for the past year, I'd like to stay on it at least through that final recommendation period, and then if some other board members want to be on it, I'd be willing to step off, and so that'd be like 2 more meetings, I think, is what we're talking about.
Well, I'd like you to stay on it.
Yeah, just for, yeah, and then we can kind of see how that shakes out as far
Actually,
as
it's-
beyond that, but,
It's Andrew who appoints.
Right.
He consults with you.
right.
Well, I
If
could
he
still
appoints-
say
He can-
I
he
would.
can-
I
and he can have
honestly
that
got an
conversation.
idea who he wants now, so
Right.
that's not gonna be a
Generally,
issue.
that's
Right.
why you guys talk about it.
Yeah.
Right.
So when I had sent the email out and wanted to do the appointment of who was going to head be the chair, I did it in the interest of what I felt was the experience and the leadership that I've had, that you guys have on this board. And I've had all the, everyone respond to me of what they wanted. So I am going to go ahead and let everyone know who is going to lead or chair each committee right now. So, Eric, you're going to, of course, you're going to continue with the TLE. I have Susan Manning. I want you to chair the policy, and Susan Fox, I want you to chair the personnel committee. Then anyone who is interested in being a member of those, please email me with your interest. I have already had a couple that was interested, and I will send out an email later on this week to let you know who is going.
Did Susan Fox is chairing the personnel committee?
Yes.
Right.
thought it was. Okay.
I had a discussion with Dean, and he said that he still wanted to chair the Personnel Committee, so I
Oh.
declined of that appointment.
Okay.
Okay, so you'll send an email out that'll just ask people to send their preferences, and then maybe you want to, since two people aren't here, include an explanation that we'll make a decision on the Community Engagement Committee later or something. But if people are interested in that, would that make sense? They could express interest to you on that too.
Yeah, we can still do that.
Okay.
Like I said, I still think that it can be dissolved because we have someone in the position to do, and she's doing a phenomenal job. So I don't want to waste anyone's time coming to a meeting and doing nothing. We can do nothing at home. So, but everything else is as is, and this is what I want. And as responsible board members that the community has voted for us to do, we want to move forward and making our, school district, better each day. Any more discussion?
Just one comment regarding the ad hoc committee. I'm in agreement with what was said. I think the board appears to me that have agreement that clearly the committee has not completed its task. And so I think when the committee comes forth with recommendations, at that time it might be good for you to have the discussion, perhaps to look at the charge and maybe clarify that at that point, whether, what that task is, whether it continues as an ad hoc or creates a standing committee. So I think at that time, perhaps we agendize it for you guys to provide that clarity.
Yeah, that'll probably be in September.
That'd be right,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Anything else? All right, move on. Facilities planning update.
Okay, so on your board docs, you see a number of items that have been working on the last couple of weeks. And what I'd like to do is point your attention to a couple specific things that we haven't discussed much. One attachment is the initial review for the traffic study. Okay, and so if you haven't had an opportunity yet, please take the opportunity to review that. That is in the process of being submitted to the Village of Cottage Grove. And it's really just an initial study information for the village and then eventually the county as well to consider as we move forward with that process, on the site plan. As a reminder, Jerry Rosine is not here this evening because he's attending the Cottage Grove Village Plan Commission meeting tonight. They are presenting he along with the EUA team is presenting, they're discussing the annexation petition right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're doing the annexation petition, and then they are having the initial presentation of the site plan, not looking for approval by any means at this point. It's just to share where we're at this process. And so I did post on the board docs the actual PowerPoint that's being presented to the Plan Commission tonight, so you can, and there shouldn't be anything new in there that you haven't seen already with regard to that site plan. Well, I take that back. With the exception of one piece, it does show potential athletic fields, how they could fit. This by no means is it, an approved plan. It's just to give an idea of what might be available on that space, near the new school. And so that's something the next time you get together with our team, with the UA, that the board can talk a little bit more about, moving forward. And they'll certainly report back on tonight's, any feedback they receive from the Plan Commission. And then the third attachment is just a follow-up to some questions and conversation from a previous workshop with regard to seating capacity of the gym. Legitimate question about, not only the educational use for our students, but, we have a number of events, school events and community events, multi-purpose. And so I think they did a nice job of putting several different scenarios together about how seating capacity could be used in that gym depending on the type of program and what that would look like. So, and that's something that, again, if there's more questions about that, I would say the next workshop when the architects are present could speak, to that a little bit more. We'll make sure this is available. But thought we'd share that out with you as well. Okay, and then,
I just wanted to mention, thank you very much for doing this. Just because we didn't do this before and
Yep.
got in trouble, so I think it's really nice to be able to see this and say, yeah, I think it'll hold what we need it to hold, rather than pulling out the bleachers and having them in the middle of the volleyball court.
Okay.
Peter?
Yeah, when it comes to the gym, I'd really like the gym to be sized appropriately for serving the student population. And to be honest, it's nice to have a big thing where we can have, the 8th grade recognition. But to be honest, I'd rather spend our money on educational spaces rather than once a year events.
Yeah.
So what I really want to know is this appropriately sized to serve an elementary population, because that's what matters to me.
I agree, and I appreciate the question, and the answer is yes. When the very first design came out and we looked at the square footage, as you know, Reed Foster is one of our administrators that have been part of our planning team, and that was his very same question, obviously being a former Phi Ed teacher. And so looking at the square footage and as far as the educational piece, even when that school does reach capacity of 700 students, and looking at what the needs would be to facilitate our Phi Ed classes, that this gym would accommodate that. It is significantly larger than the current gym at Cottage Grove School. It's similar in size to Glacial Drummond. And as we know, we have a challenge there, but that is trying to serve over 900 students.
Isn't that too large for? Isn't that larger than you would expect for a elementary student?
Well, it's 2 full stations. So if you bring the divider in the middle, to have 2 Phi Ed classes going at once with sufficient space is what the design does.
Okay.
So, but really important question. I mean, we've talked about in not only the gym with all these spaces that we don't want to cut any corners. We want to make sure we have sufficient space for everything. And so, again, I think next time we're together with the workshop, we can certainly, with the architects and others, to make sure that we really speak to that square footage and how it compares to others, and especially that, again, Reed can speak to that better than I can about the educational use.
Okay.
But he...
because that's what it needs to be sized. If you ask me, it needs to be sized for the educational use and nothing else. And if we size it for rare events, we're spending that exceed that educational capacity. We're spending money that we should be spending in educational space.
My understanding is it's approximately the same size as the gyms at the 2 new elementary schools that were built in Sun Prairie, and we've had a chance to visit those schools and to get to see firsthand what that size looks like.
Okay.
And we also be able to rent those out during the summer for basketball and stuff.
Yep, definitely with community use is
So,
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Reed did speak to that night. He was at the meeting. I thought we were all there. But I think that the mistake with Glacial Drummond is it's not really even sized well for classes, at least for the number of classes that were supposed to be in there. So I don't want to make that mistake again. So I do appreciate that we're doing it for classes, not for everything else, but we want to make sure we have enough for that as well. And given that the whole point of this was to build a core structure that could accommodate these additional students, I think it's real important not to cut corners. So
yeah. And real quickly, if you don't mind, in response to Glacial Drummond, when we have 2 Phi Ed classes at once, easily can fit in that gym. The problem is that we have at times 3 scheduled at the same time.
And there were 4 at one point. Yeah, that doesn't work. Right.
Well, and I think the other thing is, it's one of the critical things that the Health Committee is going to start working on is a wellness focus, which brings an incentive and additional opportunities in terms of negotiating your health insurance. And the other thing we want to do is look at this as an opportunity for maybe not just physical education classes, but programs in the morning for teachers or staff or students, other type of programming that will accommodate students. So we want to make sure we at least have 2 full sections to be able to move forward with that, because I think the issue of the commitment to wellness and the things that are connected to wellness are really important incentives as we deal with the health of our students and our staff.
I have two other things to add, but any other questions on the part we've talked about so far? Okay, next thing I'd like to speak to is with regard to the sustainability. I think at the last board meeting I mentioned that we had had conversations with McKinstry about assistance with making decisions about sustainable solutions. We mentioned both EUA and Findorf have staff members that, you know, that has that, have that expertise to bring to the team, but to help us with the decision making, we feel that that would be something that we would need someone that is kind of on our team to help us go through that, and that's something McKinstry does, and so that's something we're going to start bringing them to the table. It's not a large consulting fee, so we have a separate contract we bring to the board. It's well under that $25,000 threshold for having a contract. In fact, our existing relationship with them that we work, they're kind of going to follow under that, and we're just paying basically for time. But then we do expect them as well to actually bring a proposal forward that would be for board consideration, is some of that work as well that's related to some of those projects. When we talk about the LEED, certification, the idea of the commissioning, they do that work as well, and so Jared and I really felt it was important that we have someone help advise us in that. And so we'll talk more about that again the next time the board's together in a workshop on facilities, but just wanted to let you know that we're going to start bringing them to the table to help us with that. So in the short term, the first point of decision making with the new school is with regard to the LEED certification. We talked about some of those items, whether we are certified or not, are still good things to do. The question is whether it's worth the expense on some of those to act, just to get the certification if it's cost-wise. The other key pieces that really aren't that related to the certification are the main energy source, geothermal versus traditional. We're having all the testing done now. We know certainly geothermal is much more environmentally friendly, but we have to, before we make that final decision, make sure you understand the cost, impact, potential payback with that. And so next month we'll have all that data to consider to make that final decision. And then we talked about the idea of solar, as a supplement or sole source. That's the other thing that can be part of any of these projects, but to look at the scope of it and what makes sense, that's something McKinstry can advise us with as well. And then, so right now the focus is on the new school, but as we've mentioned, we also do want to look at all the existing buildings as well. And so that's where we think that they can, because they've done all that work with us as well, they can help guide us through that. So definitely more to come, but just wanted to confirm that we're going to bring them to the table to help us with that decision-making process. Okay, and I have one final thing. Okay, and this is loosely related to the facilities, and so the discussion might be more appropriate at a future meeting, but just to put it on your radar, as we talk about the facility renovations that are done. If you recall, prior to the referendum, this board took action to determine the grade configuration. It resulted in build a new 3 through 5 school, but just as importantly, the grade configuration of the existing schools, Taylor Prairie and Cottage Grove School. I think the board members have all been contacted recently, by a teacher about asking, is that something the board reconsider? I just want to let you know that I've also been contacted by other teachers about that. And so should the board want to revisit, that issue, you can. The current facilities work that we're doing does not have any, major implications on that. And so I think it's worthy to have as a discussion, and if there's interest on the board, we'd agendize a future meeting to have that discussion.
So, sorry. So we're talking about the grade configuration that we voted on?
Correct.
And we want to, they're saying that not me, but what the other people voted on is not the correct one? Then we might want to go back to.
There are teachers that would, and staff that would ask the board to reconsider that.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I'd just like to weigh in favor of having that discussion. I think, if we were going to My feeling about it that night, because I struggled with it that night, as you know, I passed first and then voted with the board kind of for the purpose of going, and partly because our 2 Cottage Grove board members were in favor of the one we decided on, and we had some input on that, but in my gut, that's not the one I favored, and I've kicked myself for it ever since then. But it's not just out of a personal reason I'd like to reconsider it. I also, when I've had conversations with even retired teachers and their educators in the time since then and thought about it, they're all kind of appalled at the idea. So whether we would change it or not, I think, to me, it wasn't vetted as, I think we were so busy focusing on the building, the new building and the needs that and I know that the Facilities Committee did wrestle with this, and they came up with that recommendation as well. But I feel like it might be something where we might even want to set up an ad hoc committee on that would involve some parents again and more teachers and just sort of hash it out. There's not a lot of research that argues one way or the other, but there are a lot of thoughts, and I know that's what I've been hearing from people. So I would, I'd appreciate having it on the agenda to talk about, to just see if we want to make a change or not. I mean, maybe we would decide not to, but I guess I just think it's something that would be worth revisiting.
Do we know, does anybody know the date that we discussed that?
I believe
It was just before the referendum.
Yeah,
I
because it
believe
was
the
the
board
last-
took action in August.
Probably, yeah.
I would just like to maybe pull it up and revisit
Yeah.
what we discussed. And look at the
That's my
notes.
recollection. It was.
But there were documents, pros and cons of each one.
Yeah.
Bring all that back too, but yeah.
Peter?
There was significant discussion, particularly in the Facilities Committee, and they did make a recommendation, and the board discussed that and accepted that recommendation. Part of it's the timing. I mean, obviously, the next time we build sometime in the future, between now and the next time we build an elementary school, we're going to have to address this issue. We're going to have to meet this. There was part of the discussion, I think part of the reluctance was that, and once we made the decision, we felt we needed to make the decision before the referendum so that we knew which direction we were going. And my thought is, with the complications of the referendum and so on, going through that, it's going to be a major change. Coming up with districts and, attendance districts and so on, it's going to be a big pain in the neck. And although I support that, I think we have to face this question sooner or later. I think that we should get through the current building cycle and the referendum and build our building, as we decided we were going to do this, and then pick up this discussion in the future. So I wouldn't support revisiting this discussion at the time. I don't think we want to jerk around all the people who have been planning to build, the building, and I don't think we want to do that. I do think we should do this, but I think we need to put it off until after a year or two, until after we're building. We can get through the current cycle.
Yeah. Go ahead, Susan.
I think if a constituent or staff who has expertise in this area suggests that we at least rediscuss it, whether it's to reaffirm our previous position, it's an opportunity to have that discussion. And it's an opportunity, again, maybe to bring you and Eric up to speed about the things that we learned while we were doing that. The research clearly for academic achievement, supports the K-5. But there was no support, effectively, from several board members, because it would require drawing a line down a community. And so we knew we needed to add space for kids. So we continued to kind of compromise on the research. There's no reason we shouldn't have a discussion. I mean, that's what the board is here for.
I think we need to be real clear, though, that we're not talking about changing the new building. I mean, and that's that we're not messing with. We're just talking about looking at Taylor Prairie and Cottage Grove School, because, one thing we had kept talking about during that whole discussion was, what about the demographics? What are they going to be like if we have 2 different districts? And we just got the numbers that very night when we had to make the decision, so we really didn't have time to absorb it. And lo and behold, it turned out there was not a significant difference if we had drawn the lines approximately where dividing it in half in the neighborhoods that made sense. They were very comparable. So that was kind of new information we got that night, but we didn't really have time to digest it because we had to make a decision. So I just felt like for that reason, and because we have heard from, you know, the one email we got was representing herself as having talked to a number of other district teachers, and I think there's been more input, as not to me, but that's what I think what you talked about.
Oh.
So my point was just to discuss the possibility, and if the board as a whole, after we discuss it, feels no, they don't want to go forward with any kind of committee or any relooking at it, then okay. But if you're telling me, which I think you're saying, is that it doesn't, there's not substantial, see, I had thought at the time there was going to be different type of remodeling in those buildings, depending on what we made. What I'm hearing, what I've been hearing since then is that's not necessarily the case. So it wouldn't really interfere with any work that's going forward. It wouldn't affect the Findorf timetable or anything else because it's not affecting the new building whatsoever. It's all work that would be done later if there was any work. So it's just a matter of having that discussion. So I'd be in favor of just discussing it, and as I say, if it doesn't go behind that discussion, okay, but at least we'd take another look at it, since we've had these requests.
All right, so what I'm hearing from it seemed like we were rushed in to trying to vote for it.
No, we were not rushed in at all trying to vote for it.
Okay, Eric's got his hand up.
This is what, let me get my explanation out, because this is what I'm hearing, is that it seemed like, what I'm hearing is it seemed like we were just rushing in to get this demographic down of what we want to do, either the 4K to 2 or the 4K.
Right.
So my question would probably be, since we're not doing any renovations on these schools at this time, not even probably for another 2 years maybe, not until the new elementary kind of gets almost complete.
Yeah, we haven't decided the schedule. There's going to be some renovations done to Cottage Grove School. And it hasn't been determined which summer that would happen, whether it be the summer of 2020 or the summer of 2021.
Okay.
There'll be, at this point, the plan is for some very minor renovations at Taylor Prairie, same thing, it's not determined, but definitely nothing this summer.
Okay, so now, so what I'm seeing, Aaron, is that now we have a little time where we could come back within the next couple of months. Maybe we have the community engagement. We have Katie maybe send out something to the community to find out again, and then go and create somewhat of a committee of parents and teachers, and then try to have them come up with a resolution, and then we work it again. Because I know we went through this before, and I know that you had a committee to get the building and the structure for it, but the way it seemed like everyone now is saying that there are people out that want to relook at this. So why don't we do this? Maybe we'll try to do this one more time. So for the ones that are, the teachers that are making the recommendation, can we revisit this? Maybe we need to get them in, see what they're talking about, give them an opportunity, and then maybe in another 3-4 months we can come up with a final solution, and then we'll stick with it. Peter?
Why would we stick with that decision since we're not sticking with the prior one? Every time somebody brings up a question, we have to reconsider the whole thing? Look, on this particular issue, you're never going to get anybody in agreement. There will always be some people on some side and some people on the other side. So if we change our decision and somebody on this other side comes back and says, well, I think you should reconsider, are we going to have another committee? Who decides what committee is the last committee? We made this decision. I think we should move forward. We can't just jerk back and forth, and we can't say, oh, the next decision will be the final one. We can't do that kind of thing. And there's two things I dispute. Strongly I dispute that we were rushed somehow into making a decision. I think we spent a lot of time on it. We spent a lot of time, covered a lot of ground on it. Secondly, I will say, and I will state categorically, there is no research that shows, there is research that shows if you take an individual student and change students, that's bad. Change schools with that student, that's bad for them. That's bad, not good for their education. But that is not the same thing as taking a whole class and moving and progressing them from one grade to the next, even in a new building. There isn't any research on that. and that's conclusive in any way. There's very little research on it. There's no conclusive research on it. So I do want to, that is not a good characterization. That moving a whole class between buildings is not. There's just not a downside. But I do say, I mean, I want to say, yes, we should reconsider this, but I think we should reconsider this after the current construction cycle.
Well, I was just going to say, we're starting to get into an argument over what the decision should be, and that wasn't the intention. I think the intention was simply, do we want to have another board discussion about this? And then if that board discussion might lead with, hopefully everybody be here at that point, might lead with reaffirming the same decision, regardless of the newer input we've gotten from people. Or it might be to set up an ad hoc committee that could look at this for a couple of months with community members, teachers, more teachers on it, where they're just looking at that specific thing. And if we do that, they may come back with the same recommendation we have on the table right now that we've already decided on, or they may recommend changing it. Then the board would have to make that decision at that point. Or, as I said, if we put it on the agenda for an upcoming board meeting, the board may simply decide, no, as take Peter's point, that no, we're done, we're not interested again. I just think it doesn't hurt to bring it up since we've had these requests. I agree with you, we can't always flip-flop on decisions, but I think there was enough, if at least two of us had voted the way we wanted to that night, it would have been a 4-3, not a 5, I mean, not a 6-1.
Why wouldn't you vote the way that you want to?
Simply, and for me, I'll say, because remember I passed the first time, and I was torn, mostly because, as I said, our two Cottage Grove board members were pretty adamant they didn't think this decision would fly in the community. And there were some parents that had emailed the board, for whom I have a lot of respect, and I was swayed somewhat by that, in spite of this nagging thing of my own, that I didn't like the idea of that many pre-KK kids. And I also kept thinking of parents who have kids, see, I'm getting into the weeds now too, but you asked me, so I'm going to answer you, of parents who have kids in the elementary school who could have easily kids in 3 different buildings. And for me, there was so much value to having the pre-K2 and then having them all come together as a 3-5 that, but as I said, in the end, I kind of bailed and went with what I saw was the majority. Well, and by then there were 4 votes for it, so I thought, okay, my vote's not going to change anything. So in the interest of speaking as a unified board, I'll vote for it. That was the comment I make if you wanted to go back and watch that meeting. I instantly regretted it, went home and didn't sleep well that night. That's how much it bothered me. And then since then, as I've had conversations with people, I have not run into any educator who has spoken in favor of it to me. So it's just bothering me more and more. So when we got this one email, and now I'm hearing there's more emails, I thought, well, maybe we should look at it again. So that's where I'm thinking right now. And as I say, it may not change anybody's mind. We may end up making the same decision because there were pros and cons for each one, and we could go through those again. But
I just have one quick comment. So I voted against that, but my concern is somewhat what Peter said. I've had votes too where I've thought very hard. I can bring up To Kill a Mockingbird. And if I start thinking about going back and now, changing my vote or how I voted, I mean, it does open up a door that, we have to be careful of. If we're going to make a vote, I do think we had enough time, or I feel like I had enough time to vote, and then revisit that issue. If we're going to do that, I guess I want more information on why we're going to do that, and why is it important that we revisit it. So is it some teachers? Is it all teachers? Is it a structural thing with the facilities that's important that we reconsider that? I'd like some more information about the reason that we would.
Sure, great question. And I'd like to, if you want to go first, I just want to explain why I brought it up tonight.
Okay.
But
go
first.
I guess my thought is, in the absence of a change in circumstances or information, I think it's too soon to reconsider this. Now, if there's been some real big change on the ground, then it's maybe worth considering. But in the absence of new information, I'm reluctant to reconsider.
Okay. So since that time, at one point a month or two ago, I was at every building giving updates on our facilities work. And this question came up at 2 different buildings from staff members about is that decision final? Would the board revisit it? And I said the board took action on it, okay? Of course, the board can revisit any item they do, but I do not intend to bring forth to the board to reconsider it, okay? Since then, as I mentioned, there's been more discussion. The board received an email. I have and had some discussion. And I guess I was aware that there may be, I believe that there are some board members that might want to revisit it. So the reason I brought it tonight is really to find out, is there an interest of just putting it on the agenda for discussion, you know, with, and it's already been articulated. If you did that, it would be to just, nope, we don't want to take this up, or is there a majority of the board that would like to, you know, really study it again? And so I thought it's, because there's been enough dialogue, in fairness, I really should have that, bring it up to you as board members so you can at least, you know, give that feedback. Ultimately, when we see the next board agenda, I'll be consulting with Andrew as board president, and so I think your comments, you know, will need to be reflected to make that decision whether to agendize it or not.
And we need to make sure that we, that Jeff and Dean knows that as well, so we can get some feedback from them as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds
All right, moving along, future meeting dates.
Okay, so Joyce added for the entire year on the future meetings, since, just to confirm what was approved at the last board meeting of one regular meeting per month. And then I also, what happened? I thought I had as an attachment.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, I lost my attachments there.
There's one for the final schedule, is that what you mean? Final
There's
board
one for
schedule?
the final
Oh,
schedule.
here we go. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
The
you.
one with the here.
Yeah, so the final schedule that the board approved, and then I also, the tentative agenda items. Took a first attempt at looking at things we traditionally do every year and figure out which meeting they would need to move to, where we don't have 2 meetings a year. That'll be a work in process, and we'll certainly be adding things, you know, moving those around. But just wanted to share that with you so you have an idea of what that might look like.
Well, and I really appreciate this. This is helpful because, again, what you'll see right away is we actually are scheduled to have 3 meetings in May, so it's really helpful to have the schedule because you don't want people walking away saying we're only going to meet once. We have 3 meetings scheduled in June as well, or the potential for 3 meetings scheduled in June. But the other thing I want to point out to the board that I think is worth discussion at some point in time, that is that, and I understand that this is basically just things that we need to talk about, but it's really interesting. If you count this up, there are 19 meetings. Of the 19 meetings, only 3 of the 19 meetings contain any item basically with academic content in it. There is there is the one where we talk about the strategic plan. That's one. There is the strategic plans and goals. There is one that talks about the high school courses, but basically that's just a presentation. So I would like to see this come back to us with some expansion. So for instance, if you look at Board Policy 2605, it specifically says the Monona Grove School District shall conduct systematic evaluations of its educational programs on an ongoing basis and shall be reviewed by the board. So as we do this, so I continue to say, I was in the Equity Committee and received some excellent information about our current progress on mental health and where we're going. That was just super. The only people that would have gotten that were the board members on that committee. So I would say, you know, bring us information, just even if it's in the superintendent report. If you would make a list of maybe 5 to 10 things, I have been asking for 2 years, and I'm going to meet with Lisa, and that's all scheduled. But do you know, as a board, how many students are being served by a statutorily mandated program for advanced learner, gifted and talented students? I don't have that information. And as a board member, my responsibility is to know and understand the educational programs that are ongoing in our school district. The other thing I don't see in here that and I didn't go back and check all the policies, just the general ones. I think we're required to have a bullying report every year. At least we were by statute. It may have changed. And we used to get an absolutely excellent report. Now they just report out the numbers. But I don't think we've had that. So I think we need to make sure that we're meeting the statutory mandates on communication of educational programs on an ongoing basis to the board. And I fully trust that you'll just make a little list and say, I'll insert these for you, and then we'll make sure that these get included in these meetings. Otherwise, we're going to look at I understand why facilities planning is on every single meeting because we're in the middle of a huge building project, but the learning of our students is on our calendar each and every day. Mm-hmm. So if I can just see a way that I'm going to be getting updates on that would be really great.
Yeah.
But I leave it up to you.
As you said, I just want to clarify the purpose of this calendar is to have as you mentioned at the beginning, this is the base things that we must do that are required statutorily, things that the board must take action on.
I'm not sure.
And at the end, when you look at the annual reports, you see the last bullet point, strategic plan goals to be determined. This board has changed course every year about how you want to receive that information. Sometimes we've done workshops. We now have a teaching learning equity committee that by the charge says that we'll review those things. So I agree we need to have those discussions, which of those are in committee reports, which ones are full board, and we will schedule some workshops. I would like to, that'd be up to you whether you want to do that or not, but that would be my recommendation so that we can do that. So yeah, that's something I think we've always struggled with about the means to have those reports. And
again, I'm not at a comfort level that we are meeting the statutory requirements for the board oversight in terms of knowing what the numbers are on the programs. And I'll go back and review the policies and come back and provide you with anything that I find. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of times we get those reports, there are a lot of numbers in them, and it might be that we get them once and we don't remember. I just checked the bullying policy, and yes, there is still supposed to be an annual report. It shall be prepared and presented to the school board, which includes trends in bullying behavior and recommendations on how to further reduce such behavior, bullying behavior. The annual report will be available to the public. So there is still
other policies like that.
There is still the seclusion and restraint was listed in the list that Dan provided us, and so that would just be another one. So there are some like that, but I guess I thought when we went to while we're on that topic, we went to one board meeting a month. Part of that was because there had been a couple board members expressing an interest in hearing more information on various things, and we thought it does give us, with all the committee meetings, but it gives us another chance to have workshops. If we want to have a particular workshop on something, that might be another way. And I think you're right, us deciding what kind of format we want to see reports in would be helpful. But just, what was nice about the committee meeting last night was I felt like we could really had time to sit and discuss things, and a lot of times when a report is given in a board meeting, you don't have that same feeling that you can take up that much time to actually have a back and forth real discussion. And then I think you just have a better understanding of what's going on when you have that kind of discussion. So to me, that's why some of that being done in separate workshops might be a good thing. And now that we have the one meeting a month, that might work. Anyway, just something to think about.
Yeah.
So if I could just point out on what's listed for the upcoming meetings, the ones in red that are special meetings, okay? You already approved May 22nd special meeting of the electors, so that is a certain thing. We've discussed, and I just wanted to confirm that May 29th will be a workshop with facilities, with the EUA team being here. And then in June, at the end of June, we'd like to schedule a workshop. That's where we'll give the ALMA group report, and that'll also be an opportunity for us to provide an update to the board on strategic plan goals. So that's something we didn't really talk about. We mentioned the possibility of June 26th for the ALMA report, but if that's acceptable for the board, we'd like to do both of those things that evening. And then,
Dan, I'm going to say, when we did that before, when we tried to include the strategic plan report and a report from each of the building principals. That did not work. There was not sufficient time to do that. I think the ALMA advisory group report is going to be something that we want the presentation, we want full time for the discussion. Generally, we put those board workshops in from 6:30 to 8:30. I would not put those two together. It's kind of like you also pulled out the superintendent eval for a workshop. We learned that's the only way to do it. You cannot do that in closed session, particularly with two other important items. You know, it's just not going to work. So I think the report on the strategic goals is something that needs to be a separately identifiable, focused workshop. And I certainly would not combine it with the ALMA advisory group. I mean, that's something that I'm sure the equity committee is going to want to come and hear that material. There may be other people that want to hear that. I wouldn't put those. I'd separate them.
Susan?
That would be my inclination also. I think the problem will be timing, because we're already at the end of June with that, and do we want to have, that would mean 2 meetings in July or 2 meetings in August or something if you want to get those in. So to me, that might be another board discussion. I don't know. I mean, or you guys can talk about it. See what you think about how long.
I'll come up with a recommendation for another date.
Okay.
I have a request that in our June meeting, we have it put on the agenda for discussion, a discussion of renewable energy. We've had a number of people request that.
Yep.
And send us emails and make public appearances.
Why are you making a motion to do that?
You don't have to.
No.
We can make a motion that the board president put it on the agenda, but we don't have to.
I'd
I'm just
support
asking
that.
him to do it.
Yeah, I'd support that too. Well, I thought I heard Dan say tonight that's going to be part of the discussion with McKinstry, so.
Yes, but I think we should have a board discussion in a public board meeting about the issue.
That's fine. I'd like to have it when we might have some information from McKinstry too, or just, I don't know, that might be helpful. But you guys can talk about it and work
I
on
want to
it.
get to understand how the board feels we should go, where direction we should go.
Well, part of that will depend on for me, what we hear from them. So.
Sure.
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Susan?
Well, I think there are two things. One, you know, all you have to do is go to Dan Choi and say, are you going to be ready June 12th to talk to us about this? I don't think they are. So I would, rather than say that's going to be in June, I would say we're going to have them come forward as soon, even if it's minimal information, as soon as they have information that they would like to share with the board and the work that they're doing. So I'm going to leave setting that date up to you. The other thing is, and I've researched this because I specifically asked the board president for 2 years to put mental health and gifted and talented on the agenda, and it truthfully is, according to board policy, at the discretion of the board president, and we didn't have those. The superintendent also has some empowerment in doing that. We can request it, but it doesn't mean you have to.
We can discuss that as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
If I may, I'm not interested in hearing what McKinstry thinks about it. I want to know what the board thinks about it, and that's why I would ask that we do it in June. It's not dependent on, in my mind, it's not, what I'm asking for is not dependent on McKinstry. Thank you.
Is there any question that we don't support it?
I'm sorry, you just said you wanted to do it when McKinstry is ready, and I said I wanted to do it in June.
Could you help me with this? I'm not understanding.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I got the impression that you were asking the president to put it off until McKinstry was ready with something, I don't know what, and I was requesting that it not be put off, but that in fact it be put on the agenda in June.
Okay, Susan?
I guess my only reason for thinking that it would be also nice to have their input was if we're really talking about making some kind of pledge or something like that, I think the cost is extremely important, and that's why I thought it'd be interesting. I mean, I unquestionably, I think all of us support doing whatever we can do. what we want to do with it, and we can have that discussion when it's on the agenda, but it seemed to me the more information we have at the time to make some kind of decision would be helpful. So you guys decide when you want to have it. I don't care. We can talk about it twice. We can talk about it in June. We can talk about it again.
I'm asking for discussion only.
I got it.
I'm
Yeah,
not
I got
asking
it.
for any decisions to be made.
Okay, well, I wasn't sure where you were
I just wanted
going.
to understand where the board is with this, and the only way we can reach that is to have a public discussion, where the board is with this. And if we want to move forward with anything, and if we want to ask McKinstry or anybody else for any other information, if we want to do that, we can do that at the time.
We've had requests for resolutions, that's why I wondered, but yeah, okay. So if all you want to do is talk,
Yeah, and we can talk about whether we want to move forward with a resolution, or whether we want to
Right.
propose a resolution. We can talk about all that stuff.
We'll talk, me and Dan will talk about it, put it, so we can get it on the agenda at the next board meeting.
Sounds fine to me.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we didn't miss that much.